Quaid Azam, Part 200. Nehru believed that the Muslims in UP were in a ferment. They were fed up with ineffectual communal leadership. They wished to climb out of the communal rut and to line up with the forces of freedom and progress. The elections had gone some way to lay the ghost of the communalism, insofar as to a section of the Muslims was alienated from the Congress. It was the urban as opposed to the rural Muslims. I'm sure that when the next opportunity comes, we shall not lose a single Muslim seat in the rural areas, though I'm not quite certain about what the urban seats would do, given this kind of optimistic unreality for an assessment of 1937 elections. It is not at all surprising that Nehru was certainly sanguine about the Congress taking office in UP without the Muslim League. The second feature of the Congress political ideology, allowing it to ignore this, demonstrated the lack of support for the Muslim electorate, was its commitment to a Congress-kind Westminster model of majoritarian democracy. A simple majority in the legislature being enough to form the government, and the arithmetic constituency the only legitimacy, but in India a complex social arithmetic also operated. It did so simultaneously. This notion blinded Nehru and many other congressmen to the fact that under the system of separate electorates, the Congress had agreed to play the electoral game according to the rules in the 1935 Constitution. A government at an entirely any majoritarian, not reasonably inclusive of the minorities in this instance. Well, Muslim MLAs would be seen as unrepresentative of the government. There were others, of course, within the Congress, and there were and are still many of this ilk, for whom this political model was a means to the end of showing the Muslim minority in the UP as its place. When the Congress found government with almost all the Muslim MLAs sitting in the opposition benches, non-Congress Muslims were certainly faced with the stark reality of near total political powerlessness. It was brought home to them like a bolt of lightning that even if the Congress did not win a single Muslim seat, as had happened now in the 1937 elections, so long as to win an absolute majority in the House, on the strength of the general Hindu seats, it could and would form a government entirely on its own, unless Muslim politicians altogether surrendered their separate political identity, in which case they would hardly be elected in the first place. Yet again, this carried a very serious damaging message for the future of the United India, and that in a majoritarian-minded Congress ruled India, there was no place for the Muslims, indeed for any political minority, unless the Congress found itself in a corner, then it would ally with anyone. Speaking of the decision not to form a coalition ministry, in the history of the freedom movement in India records, there is no doubt that the decision of the Congress leader was extremely unwise, and it was bound to have disastrous consequences. The Muslims now fully realized that a separate community, they had no political prospects. The Congress ultimatum was the signal of partitioning the ways, which by inevitable stages led to the foundation of Pakistan. In his transfer of power in India, V.P. Menon wrote, the Congress decided to have homogeneous ministries on its own and chose Muslim ministries from among those who were members of the Congress party. This was the beginning of a serious rift between the Congress and the League, and was a factor which induced the neutral Muslim opinion to run to the support of Jinnah. In his autobiography, India Wins Freedom, Maulana Abdul Kalam Azad, who was the president of the Congress from 1939 to 1946, speaking of the aftermath of the 1937 elections, wrote, "If the UP League's office cooperation had been accepted, the Muslim League Party would, for all practical purposes, have merged in the Congress. Jawaharlal's action gave Muslim League in UP a new lease of life, full advantage to the situation, and started an offensive which ultimately led to the partition." In his biography of Nehru, Bracher commented the immediate and most far-reaching effect of Congress victory at the polls was widening of the breach with Muslim League. Flushed with success, Congress adopted imperious attitude to all other political parties, a Himalayan blunder for which it was to pay clearly in the years to come. Nehru himself set the tone with his hearty remarks in March 1937. There are only two forces in India today, British imperialism and Indian nationalism, as represented by Congress. Jinnah was quick to retort, "No, there is a third party, the Musalman. History was to bear him out." Writing in 1969, Shiva Rao referred to 1937 elections and said that it was significant that even after the elections, Jinnah was not thinking of a separate state of Pakistan. In a public statement shortly after the elections in 1937, he declared, "Nobody will welcome an honorable settlement between Hindus and Muslims more than I beg your pardon, more than I, and nobody will be more ready to help it." He followed it with a public appeal to Gandhi to tackle this question. The latter's response was somewhat depressing. "Wish I could do something, but I'm utterly helpless. My faith in unity is bright as ever, only I see no daylight, but impenetrable darkness, and in such distress I cry out to God for light." God, it transpires, was sadly not then willing to illuminate the Congress path with wisdom or light. And more than Gandhi, it is unlikely that anyone else in the Congress had a better access to the Creator's ear. He was unquestionably a devout Hindu, certainly more than Nehru, whose thinking and path, sadly, language and idioms too, was lit up more by an impotent Western notions than by India's great wealth of faith, thought, and wisdom. This is Quaid Azam, Part 200.